When the fire becomes the center of the world, what if the most important moment of your entire day was the moment the sun disappeared? Not because something exciting happened, but because everything slowed down. In the 1700s, evening was not just the end of the day, it was the beginning of stillness. There were no glowing screens, no electric lights humming softly in the background, no endless distractions waiting in your hand. There was only the fire and the quiet and the people closest to you. Tonight, you are stepping into that world. The last light of the day does not disappear quickly. It lingers. Soft golden light stretches across the wooden floor of a small home.
Dust floats slowly through the air, visible only because the sun is still holding on. Outside, the land is quiet, not empty, just resting. Inside, the house breathes slowly. Wood creaks gently. A faint draft slips through unseen cracks. Elizabeth moves first. Not quickly, not urgently. Elizabeth, she does not look at the window. She already knows the light is fading. She moves toward the hearth, because that is where the evening begins. The fire is not gone, but it is no longer strong. It glows quietly, like something waiting to be noticed again. Thomas sits nearby. He does not speak, not because he has nothing to say, but because silence is part of this hour. Mary is closer to the table. She traces a small pattern on the wooden surface, not thinking, just feeling the texture. Samuel sits on the floor. He watches the fire, not moving. Elizabeth kneels slowly. She reaches toward the hearth, adds a small piece of wood. The fire responds, not dramatically, but enough. A soft crackle, a small shift in light. The room changes, just a little. This is how evening works here. Not in sudden moments, but in small adjustments. Thomas leans back slightly. The chair creaks under his weight. Mary looks up. Only for a second. She traces a small pattern on the wooden surface, not thinking, just feeling the texture. Samuel sits on the floor. He watches the fire, not moving. Elizabeth kneels slowly. She reaches toward the hearth, adds a small piece of wood. The fire responds, not dramatically, but enough. A soft crackle, a small shift in light. The room changes, just a little. This is how evening works here. Not in sudden moments, but in small adjustments. Thomas leans back slightly. The chair creaks under his weight. Mary looks up. Only for a second. Samuel does not look away from the fire. Elizabeth sits back. Her hands rest in her lap. No one rushes. No one asks what comes next, because everyone already knows. Evening is not planned, it is repeated, a habit built over hundreds of nights. Outside, the last light fades completely. Inside, the fire becomes everything. Time moves differently now, not measured, not tracked, only felt. Elizabeth reaches for a small cloth. Not new, not clean, but useful. She begins to mend a small tear, carefully, slowly. Thomas watches the fire. Mary leans closer to the table. Samuel shifts slightly. The room settles deeper into itself. This is what life looks like when nothing demands your attention. No noise, no urgency. Only presence. Minutes pass, or maybe longer. There is no way to know. Elizabeth pauses, looks at the fire. Thomas finally speaks, but softly, almost like part of the air. The words are not important. The sound is. Mary listens. Samuel listens. Elizabeth listens. This is how stories begin. Not with excitement, but with quiet. And tonight, the story is simply this: a family, a fire, and the slow passing of time. The quiet work of evening. The fire no longer rises. It settles into something slower. The room feels different now. Not brighter, not darker, just quieter. Evening has fully arrived. There is no trace of the sun anymore. Only the glow of the hearth remains. Soft, steady, alive. Elizabeth sits close to the fire. The cloth still rests in her hands, but her fingers have slowed. Not because she is tired, but because the moment asks for stillness. Each movement feels heavier now, more deliberate. The thread pulls gently through the fabric. A soft sound, barely noticeable. Across the room, Thomas does not move. He has not shifted for some time, but he is not asleep. His breathing is slow, measured. His eyes rest on the fire.
Not focused, not distant, somewhere in between. Mary leans slightly forward. Her elbows rest on the wooden table. The surface is worn, smooth in places, rough in others. She runs her fingers across it again, but slower now, as if the texture itself is part of the evening. Samuel adjusts his position on the floor, carefully, quietly. He moves closer to the warmth. The fire draws him in. Not with force, but with comfort. Elizabeth pauses. The cloth remains still in her hands. She looks at the fire. Not thinking. Not remembering. Just watching. A small sound breaks the silence. The wood shifts inside the hearth. A gentle crack. The flame flickers, just for a moment, then steadies again. Thomas exhales softly. Almost like a response. Mary looks toward him, only briefly, then back to the table. Samuel does not move. The room returns to silence. This is the quiet work of evening. Not something taught, not something explained, something lived. Elizabeth folds the cloth slowly. She places it beside her. The work is done, but the evening is not.
there is still time. Time without purpose. Time without demand. She reaches toward a small pot near the hearth. Her fingers wrap around the handle. Careful. Steady. She lifts it slightly. A faint warmth rises. Not strong, but enough. The smell is simple. Grain. Water. Maybe something added earlier in the day. It is not important. What matters is the warmth. She sets it back near the fire. Thomas watches. Without turning his head, Mary notices. Samuel notices too. But no one speaks. Words are fewer now. And when they come softly. Elizabeth finally breaks the silence. Her voice is low, gentle. Just a few words. Simple ones. Thomas nods slowly. Mary listens carefully. Samuel listens too. The words do not carry far, but they stay in the room. They settle, like the fire. And then, silence returns again. Deeper this time. More complete. The fire glows. The shadows move. The house rests. And inside it, 4 people share the same quiet. Not doing anything. Just being. The hour before true night. The fire no longer speaks loudly. It only breathes. By now, the house has entered a deeper kind of silence. Not empty, just softened. Outside, the world has fully disappeared into night. No light remains on the horizon. Only darkness and distance. Inside, the small wooden home holds its own warmth. Fragile, but steady. Elizabeth is still near the hearth, but her movements have changed. Her hands are no longer working. They are resting. The cloth she was mending now lies folded beside her. Not unfinished, just paused. Thomas shifts slightly in his chair. A small movement, almost unnoticeable. His eyes remain open, but unfocused. Mary sits closer to the table than before. Her body has softened into stillness. Her head tilts slightly downward. Samuel is almost fully still now. Only small breathing movements remain. Samuel, young boy, approximately 7 years old, fair skin, messy light brown hair, soft, round face, very calm, sleepy expression, wearing a simple shirt and short trousers. Gentle, quiet presence. His eyes drift between open and closed. The fire has become quieter, smaller. Not dying, just slowing. Elizabeth finally stands. Slowly, carefully. She moves toward the small wooden shelf near the hearth. Her steps are soft, deliberate. She reaches for a small container. Simple, worn, familiar. Inside is nothing important, but it is part of routine. Thomas watches her movement. Without turning fully, Mary notices. Her head tilts slightly downward. Samuel is almost fully still now. Only small breathing movements remain. Samuel, young boy, approximately 7 years old, fair skin, messy light brown hair, soft, round face, very calm, sleepy expression, wearing a simple shirt and short trousers. Gentle, quiet presence. His eyes drift between open and closed. The fire has become quieter, smaller. Not dying, just slowing. Elizabeth finally stands. Slowly, carefully. She moves toward the small wooden shelf near the hearth. Her steps are soft, deliberate. She reaches for a small container. Simple, worn, familiar. Inside is nothing important, but it is part of routine. Thomas watches her movement. Without turning fully, Mary notices.
Barely. Samuel does not move at all. Elizabeth returns to the hearth. She lowers herself again beside the fire. No urgency remains in her actions, only rhythm. The fire answers her presence with a faint flicker, as if acknowledging her. A soft crack, then silence again. The room feels smaller now, not physically, but emotionally. Closer, safer. Elizabeth looks at the fire for a long moment, not thinking of tomorrow, not thinking of yesterday, only the present glow. Thomas finally exhales deeper, a sign of release. Mary's eyes close briefly, then open again. Samuel leans slightly to one side, more still now. Time is no longer measured here. It is only experienced. Elizabeth places her hands together in her lap. Stillness settles fully.
The fire continues its final stage of evening. Not bright, not strong, just present. Outside, the wind moves gently past the house, but does not enter. Inside, nothing changes anymore. And that is the point. The day is complete. Not ended suddenly, but dissolved slowly. Elizabeth does not speak. Neither does Thomas. Neither does Mary. Neither does Samuel. Because everything has already been said, without words. The room holds them quietly, like a memory that refuses to fade. And slowly, even that memory begins to soften.
The first light before morning. The night does not end with a sound. It ends with a change you almost don't notice. Inside the wooden house, the last ember of the hearth has long stopped glowing with strength. What remains is only memory, warmth that lingers in the air, even when the fire itself has nearly vanished. The room is no longer active with life. It is simply holding it. Elizabeth is the first to drift fully into sleep without even realizing when it happened. Her body stays where it is, near the hearth, still upright in a soft, resting posture. But her thoughts are gone now, floating somewhere beyond the room. Elizabeth, adult woman, approximately 35 years old, fair skin, slightly weathered from outdoor work, light brown hair tied in a loose
bun with a few soft strands framing her face. Calm, peaceful sleeping expression. Wearing a simple long linen dress in faded beige color with a worn apron. Resting still near the hearth, posture relaxed and unmoving.
Thomas is not fully asleep yet. But he is no longer awake in the way that matters. His eyes are closed halfway, as if he is listening to something far away that no one else can hear. The silence has become comfortable for him, familiar, like a language he understands better than speech.
Mary shifts once, just once, a small movement, like a thought passing through sleep. Then she becomes still again. Her breathing is soft and slow. Samuel has already fully surrendered to sleep. His small body leans slightly toward warmth, as if the fire still exists in his dreams. His face is calm, completely free of thought. The house itself feels different now.
Not empty, but paused, as if time has decided to wait here for a while. Outside, the night is still complete. No movement, no sound. Only distance and darkness stretching in every direction. But something is changing. Very slowly. A faint shift in color begins at the edge of the world. Not yet visible through the window. Not yet bright enough to name. Just a suggestion. A possibility. Dawn is approaching. Inside, none of them are aware of it. Sleep does not recognize time in the same way. It only understands rest. The hearth gives one final soft warmth before settling completely into ash. A quiet surrender. No crackle, no spark. Just stillness. The wooden walls of the house hold the cold gently, like they have done many times before.
They do not resist the night. They endure it. Elizabeth's breathing remains steady. Thomas shifts slightly in his chair, then becomes still again. Mary's head lowers a fraction more. Samuel does not move at all. Everything in the room has found its final position for the night. Nothing left to adjust, nothing left to do. Time continues anyway, slowly, without permission. Somewhere beyond the house, the world begins to soften. The darkness is no longer absolute. It starts to lose its weight. A pale thread of light begins to form at the edge of the horizon. Not strong enough to be seen through walls, but strong enough to exist. The kind of light that does not announce itself. It simply arrives. Inside the house, sleep deepens, not disturbed by change.
Only carried through it. Elizabeth's face relaxes further. The lines of fatigue soften into something peaceful. Thomas's breathing becomes more even, less heavy, more natural. Mary remains still, but her expression loosens, as if a dream has become gentler. Samuel turns his head slightly, as if responding to something in sleep, then settles again. The house is no longer holding the end of the day. It is holding the beginning of something else. And yet, nothing dramatic happens. No sudden brightness, no transformation. Only continuation. The world outside slowly begins to awaken, while the world inside remains asleep. Two rhythms existing at the same time. One ending, one beginning. The boundary between them is almost invisible.
Almost nothing, but it is there. A quiet truth of every night. Nothing ever fully disappears.
It only changes form. Inside the wooden house, 4 lives rest in the same space, under the same roof, within the same silence. Not separate, not divided, just together in stillness. And somewhere beyond the horizon, morning continues its slow approach. Not rushing, not waiting, just becoming. The night does not resist it. It simply lets go. And so does the house. Without awareness, without effort, without sound. The morning that moves slowly. Morning does not arrive in a hurry. It never does. In this part of the world, especially in a home like this, morning is something that unfolds gently, almost reluctantly, as if the night is still deciding whether it truly wants to leave. Inside the wooden house, the first real light of day is now present. Not bright yet, not sharp, just soft. It spreads across the floor in thin layers, touching the edges of furniture, the corners of walls, the quiet places where darkness used to sit so comfortably only hours ago. Elizabeth is the first to fully awaken. Not suddenly, not with surprise, but in a slow return, like someone coming back from a long distance. Her eyes open without urgency. For a moment, she simply lies still, listening. Not to sound, but to absence, the absence of night. Elizabeth. Find Thomas. Thomas shifts next. A slow movement in the wooden chair. His body remembers sleep before his mind fully does. He exhales once, longer than usual, as if releasing the weight of the night. His eyes open partially, adjusting to the soft morning glow entering through the window. Thomas. Mary is still half in sleep. Her head leans slightly forward near the table. Her breathing is steady, slow, unbroken. She does not yet fully notice the change in light. Her world is still partly made of dreams. Mary. Samuel remains the deepest in sleep, completely still, unaware of morning's arrival. His small form rests close to the hearth, where warmth once gathered during the night. Samuel. The fire is gone now. Completely. Only ash remains. But even ash has its own kind of presence in the morning light. Elizabeth stands slowly. Her movements are not rushed. There is no reason for them to be. She looks around the room, not inspecting, just acknowledging, the way one acknowledges a space that has carried them through the night. The morning light makes everything look slightly different. Not new, but revealed. The wooden textures feel more visible. The worn edges of the table feel more honest. The room does not feel changed. It feels understood. Thomas rises next, slowly pushing himself out of the chair. His joints adjust quietly to movement again. There is no conversation yet. Morning begins without words. Mary finally stirs more noticeably. Her head lifts slightly. Her eyes open a little more, still soft, still adjusting. Samuel remains asleep. For him, night has not fully ended yet. Elizabeth moves toward the window. She does not open it immediately. She simply stands near it, watching the light outside grow slowly stronger. Outside,
the world is already active in its quiet way. Not loud, but alive. Distant shapes of trees become clearer. The sky shifts from pale gray into a softer gold-blue blend. This is the part of the day where everything feels like it is remembering its shape again. Thomas steps closer to the table. He rests his hand on it briefly. A small grounding gesture. Something physical to mark the beginning of the day. Mary finally straightens a little more. Her awareness returns in fragments.
Not fully formed thoughts, just presence. Elizabeth finally opens the window. Slowly. A thin line of morning air enters the room. Cool, fresh, carrying the outside world into the inside one. Samuel shifts slightly in his sleep as the cooler air reaches him, but does not wake. The house is no longer sealed in night. It is now part of the morning again. Elizabeth stands quietly at the window. She does not speak. She simply observes the day becoming real. Thomas moves toward the corner where daily tasks will begin again. Not yet working, just preparing. Mary watches the room with newly opened eyes. Still quiet, still gentle. And Samuel remains asleep, held gently between night and morning. The day has begun, but slowly enough that no one feels it arrive too sharply. It simply becomes. The work hidden inside ordinary days. Morning does not stay gentle forever. It slowly turns into something structured, something required, something expected. By the time the sun climbs higher above the rural horizon, the wooden house that once held sleep has already transformed into a space of quiet activity. Not loud activity, not rushed movement, but steady, necessary motion. Elizabeth is already used to this shift. She does not think of it as change. To her, it is simply continuation. Night becomes morning. Morning becomes work. Work becomes evening. And then again, night returns. There is no dramatic separation between these parts of the day, only transition. Inside the house, the light has fully settled now. It no longer enters in soft, thin lines. It fills the room completely. Elizabeth moves through the space with a calm sense of familiarity. Her hands know where things belong without needing to pause and think. The wooden surfaces, the containers, the small household items, all of them have assigned places in her memory. Thomas is no longer inside the house most of the time. He steps in and out. The door becomes a quiet rhythm of his presence. Open, close, open again. Outside, the world requires him in ways the house does not. There is wood to manage, simple repairs, work that does not need explanation, only repetition. Mary now sits near the window for longer periods of time, not because she is idle, but because she is learning how the day behaves. She watches light shift across the yard. She watches shadows shorten and then slowly turn again. Children in this time do not only play, they observe. They absorb the rhythm of life without being told it is important. Mary Samuel is more restless now. Not in a chaotic way, but in the way a young body responds to full daylight after long night stillness. He moves between sitting and standing, between watching and wandering, between attention
and curiosity. Samuel? The house itself begins to feel different compared to the night. It is no longer a resting place. It is now a functioning space. But still quiet. Always quiet. Elizabeth begins simple tasks that repeat across many days of her life. Not because they are exciting, but because they are necessary. Water is checked. Cloth is adjusted. Objects are cleaned. Not perfectly, but consistently. There is a kind of dignity in repetition that does not ask for attention. Outside, the world is brighter now. The sky has fully transitioned into a stable daytime blue. Clouds drift slowly, not rushing anywhere. Nothing in the landscape appears hurried. This is the strange truth of rural life. Even labor feels slow when compared to modern imagination. But it is not less work. It is simply differently paced work. Thomas returns briefly inside. He does not stay long. He exchanges a few silent gestures with Elizabeth. No need for long explanation. They already understand the day's structure. Mary brings him something small.
Not a formal interaction, just a quiet exchange of presence. Samuel follows Thomas briefly toward the door, then stops. He does not go outside yet. The boundary between inside and outside still feels important to him. The door remains open for a moment. Light floods the interior. Then it closes again, and the house returns to its quieter state. Elizabeth continues her tasks, but now there is rhythm in her movement, a pattern that matches the day itself. Time in this world is not measured by clocks. It is measured by activity and by light. As midday approaches, the warmth of the sun becomes more steady, not intense, just present, constant. Mary begins to help in small ways. She does not think of it as responsibility. She thinks of it as normal life. Samuel watches her sometimes, then loses focus again, then returns. That is how his attention moves through the world. Elizabeth pauses occasionally, not because she is tired, but because she is aware of everything happening at once. The house, the light, the movement of people, the quiet balance of daily life. There is no urgency, but there is structure. Outside, Thomas's presence becomes less visible, but still felt. Occasional sounds from outside reach the house. Wood shifting, steps on earth, distant movement. The world is active, but not noisy. As the afternoon begins to form, shadows inside the house shift again. Not darkening, just changing direction. Elizabeth notices this without needing to look directly. She knows the timing of light better than any clock. Afternoon has a calming effect on her. Samuel eventually sits near the hearth space again, even though no fire is present. It is a habit of comfort, a memory of warmth that remains even when warmth is gone. The house continues like this, not changing dramatically, just adjusting slightly with each passing hour. There is a lesson in this kind of life that is not spoken, that stability is not created by intensity. It is created by repetition. By evening, the house begins to slow again, not because work is finished, but because light itself is changing direction. Elizabeth prepares the space for night in a quiet, anticipatory way. Not rushing, just preparing. Thomas returns once more. His body carries the weight of the day, but his expression remains steady. Mary becomes quieter. Samuel becomes more still. The rhythm begins again. Not night yet, but the approach of it. And this is how the cycle continues. Not as separate events, but as one continuous movement of time. The day that slows before rain. There are days when time feels heavier than usual. Not because anything is wrong, but because the air itself feels different. On this particular morning, the sky above the rural landscape is not as clear as before. It carries a softness that suggests change. Not sudden change, but inevitable change. Inside the wooden house, Elizabeth notices it before anyone else speaks. Not through thought, through feeling. The kind of awareness that comes from living close to nature for many years. Thomas is already outside, but his pace is slower today. He looks upward more often than usual. The air feels heavier on his shoulders. Work continues, but with less urgency. Thomas, Mary feels it in a different way. Not as weather, but as mood. She becomes quieter without being told to be quiet. Mary, Samuel, senses only comfort in the change. For him, cloudy days mean softer light, and softer light means easier resting moments. Samuel, the sky outside continues to shift. Clouds gather slowly. Not dark enough to frighten, just heavy enough to notice. Inside the house, Elizabeth begins adjusting small things earlier than usual. Not because anything has happened, but because experience tells her what might come later. Water is checked. Cloth is brought closer. Small items are secured in their usual places. Not out of fear, out of habit. Thomas returns briefly inside. There was a quiet understanding between him and Elizabeth. No need for explanation. The sky has already spoken. Mary watches them both. She does not ask questions. She simply observes the rhythm of adults responding to something invisible. Samuel moves closer to the table where Mary sits. He seems more interested in her presence than anything outside. The house becomes slightly quieter, even though no one is speaking less than usual. Silence changes form depending on atmosphere. Outside, wind begins to shift direction. Not strong, but noticeable. Trees move differently now. Less playful, more deliberate. Elizabeth pauses at the window again. This time, she does not just observe. She confirms. Yes, the change is coming. Not danger, not urgency, just transition. Thomas prepares to finish outdoor tasks earlier than usual. There is no need to rush, only to adapt. Mary begins helping in small ways again. Her movements are slower, more thoughtful, as if she is learning how atmosphere affects behavior. Samuel sits near the hearth space again. He likes the consistency of that place, even when fire is absent. The house feels like it is holding its breath. Not tense, just aware. As midday passes, the sky grows more layered. Clouds now cover most of the horizon. Light becomes diffused, soft, even. Elizabeth notices how everything inside the house looks slightly different under this light. Less sharp, more gentle. Time feels slower again, but not stopping, just softened. Thomas finally returns fully from outside work.
His movements suggest completion rather than interruption.
There is a shared understanding now in the house. Today will not be like the previous ones, but it will still be normal. Mary becomes quieter as afternoon begins. Not tired, just reflective. Samuel drifts into a short nap without meaning to. The atmosphere encourages rest more than activity. Elizabeth prepares a simple meal earlier than usual, not because of hunger, but because of rhythm. The house slowly transitions from daytime activity toward evening readiness. Without announcement, without structure, just flow. Outside, first drops of rain begin to fall. Not heavy, just testing the earth. The sound is soft on the roof, almost comforting. Mary notices first. She moves closer to the window. Samuel remains asleep, unbothered. Thomas looks outside once more, then steps back inside fully. Elizabeth does not react strongly. She simply acknowledges. Yes, the change has arrived. Rain continues gently. Not storm, not force, just presence. The house becomes warmer inside compared to outside. A natural contrast emerges. All movement inside slows further. Not because of restriction, but because of mood. The day continues, but differently now. The morning after the rain. Rain does not end loudly. It fades, slowly, like a thought that no longer needs to be spoken. The night has already settled deeply over the countryside. But something remains in the air. A softness, a heaviness, a memory of water still present on every surface. Inside the wooden house, sleep is deeper than usual. Not because of exhaustion, but because rain has a way of quieting everything, even thought itself. Elizabeth sleeps lightly. Her mind does not fully release the awareness of the weather. It stays somewhere between rest and attention, as it often does for those who live close to nature. Elizabeth. Thomas sleeps more heavily. His body carries the weight of the day without resistance. Work always leaves him like this. Quiet. Still. Mary sleeps in a lighter rhythm. Children always do. Their sleep moves in small waves, dreams and awareness blending together. Samuel sleeps closest to stillness, completely absorbed by rest, his small body curled slightly near warmth. Outside, the rain has stopped, but everything is still wet. The world is not dry yet. It is in between states. Morning arrives slowly, not with sunlight, but with lightness, a gradual lifting of darkness. Inside the house, the first sign of morning is not movement. It is sound. A distant bird, then another. Elizabeth is the first to sense the shift. Not awake fully, but aware enough to notice change. She opens her eyes slowly. The room is dim, but no longer deep night. It is something in between. Elizabeth does not move immediately. She listens to silence after rain. It feels different than normal silence. Heavier, more meaningful. Elizabeth slowly waking from sleep. Calm, reflective expression, adjusting gently to morning stillness.
Soft, tired eyes observing faint light entering room. Thomas shifts slightly. A small movement. His sleep begins to loosen, the body responding before awareness. Thomas shifts slightly. A small movement. His sleep begins to loosen, the body responding before awareness. Mary turns slightly in her sleep, not waking yet, but sensing light change. Mary turns slightly in her sleep, not waking yet, but sensing light change. Samuel remains still. For him, night has not fully released him yet. Samuel, young boy, deeply asleep, calm, undisturbed posture. As morning strengthens, the house begins to show subtle transformation. Water droplets outside windows catch faint light. The world feels washed clean. Elizabeth finally sits up. Slow, unhurried. There is no urgency in this morning, only continuation. She does not immediately start work. She simply observes the room, the way it feels after rain. Different, softer, quieter in a new way. Thomas opens his eyes shortly after. He does not speak. He rarely does in these first moments. Silence in this house is never empty. It is full of understanding. Mary begins to wake slowly. Her eyes open halfway. She does not move much yet. Samuel still sleeps.
The last to leave night behind. Elizabeth stands and walks toward the window. Outside, everything glistens. Leaves, wood, earth. Everything holds traces of the storm. She opens the window slightly. Fresh air enters. Cool, clean, carrying the scent of wet ground. This smell is not just weather. It is memory of rain. Thomas joins her near the window. They do not speak. They both understand what they are seeing. Mary now sits up fully. She watches them, quietly, learning without instruction. Samuel finally stirs, not fully awake, just shifting toward morning. The house is not yet active, but it is no longer asleep. Outside, sunlight begins to return in fragments, not full brightness. Just soft emergence. Elizabeth begins small movements again. Not work yet. Preparation for work. The day after rain is always slower. Everything takes longer to resume. Thomas steps outside briefly. The ground is wet, soft underfoot. The world feels freshly made again. Mary follows him to the door, but does not go out. She watches instead. Samuel finally wakes fully, confused at first, then calm. The house begins its slow return to rhythm. Not urgency, not pressure, just gradual re-entry into life. The day the house remembers. There are certain days that do not begin with change. They begin with memory. Not the kind you think about, but the kind you feel without knowing why. The morning arrives softly over the countryside. No dramatic light, no strong wind, just a pale, patient sky, as if the world itself is thinking before speaking. Inside the wooden house, everything feels familiar again after the rain. But something subtle has shifted. Not in objects, in atmosphere.
in the way silence sits inside a room. Elizabeth wakes before anyone else, not because she must, but because she always does. Her eyes open slowly, as if she is returning from a place far away, but not forgotten. Elizabeth. She listens.
Not to sound, but to absence of sound. The kind that only exists after rain has ended and the world has not yet decided what it will become. Thomas is still asleep. His breathing is steady, heavy, unchanged. A man who works physically often sleeps like stone softened by time. Thomas. Mary begins to stir slowly. Her waking is gentle, like light entering water. Not sudden, not complete. Mary Samuel is still fully asleep. Children hold on to sleep longer when the world is quiet, especially after rain. Samuel. Elizabeth stands slowly and walks toward the window. Outside, the world is washed clean again. But not new. It feels remembered. Like the land has gone through something and chosen to remain gentle afterward. She opens the window slightly. Cool air enters. Soft. Balanced. Almost like a breath the house has been waiting for. The smell is different after rain. Earth feels closer. Time feels slower. Thoughts feel clearer. Thomas finally shifts in bed. Not waking yet, but returning. Mary sits up fully now. She looks around the room as if checking whether everything is still where it should be. It is, but it feels slightly different anyway. Because perception changes after emotional weather. Not physical weather, emotional weather. Elizabeth begins preparing the morning quietly. Not in routine urgency, but in reflective rhythm. Each movement slightly slower than usual. Water is collected. Cloth is unfolded. Wood is checked. Nothing dramatic, just life continuing itself. Outside, birds begin to return in small numbers. Not loud, not celebratory, just present. Thomas finally opens his eyes. He does not speak immediately. He never does. Morning for him is always a slow return. Mary walks toward Elizabeth without speaking. She stands nearby, observing. Children often learn by proximity rather than instruction. Samuel finally shifts again. This time, deeper movement. The final release of sleep. Elizabeth glances at him. Not with urgency, with patience. The house is awake now, but not active yet. There is a difference. Awake means aware. Active means engaged. Time moves slowly through the wooden structure, each room holding yesterday's quiet, still slightly damp in memory. Thomas stands and stretches. The simple physical act signals the beginning of the day more than words ever could. Mary begins helping without being asked, not because she must, but because she understands rhythm. Samuel follows her movements clumsily, copying without fully understanding. Outside, sunlight grows stronger, but still soft, not sharp yet. Elizabeth opens the door briefly. The world outside feels larger than yesterday, even though nothing has changed. That is how recovery works. Not by becoming new, but by becoming familiar again. Thomas steps outside first. His boots touch wet earth, still slightly damp beneath the surface. He pauses, just once, to feel the ground. Not because he needs to, because he can. Mary watches him from inside. She learns from small pauses like this that life is not only movement, it is also observation. Samuel follows Elizabeth near the doorway. He does not go outside fully. He watches instead, half inside, half outside. That is where children often exist, between spaces, between understanding. Elizabeth begins to prepare midday rhythm early, not because time demands it, but because life always returns to structure after emotional disruption, even small ones, like weather. The house slowly returns to normal sound. Wood movement, soft footsteps, quiet breathing. Nothing is rushed. Everything is resumed. And in this return, something subtle happens. The house feels more alive than before rain. Not louder, just deeper. Because silence has weight after it has been experienced. And everything after silence feels more meaningful. The day continues, not as a new beginning, but as a continuation that now remembers the rain. The light that remains. There are endings that feel like silence, and there are endings that feel like understanding. This day begins like any other. Soft light, still air. A quiet wooden house standing where it has always stood. But something is different. Not in the sky, not in the ground, not even in the house. It is in the way the day is felt. Elizabeth wakes before the others, as she always does. But this morning, she does not move immediately. She lies still, eyes open, watching the ceiling beams above her. Elizabeth, there is no reason to hurry. There never. Thomas is still asleep, his breathing steady, unchanged. The same rhythm that is carried through every day before this one. Thomas Mary turns slightly in her sleep, her face peaceful, untroubled. Mary. Samuel remains curled near the hearth, completely still. The kind of stillness that only exists in deep, trusting rest. Samuel. Elizabeth slowly sits up. This time, not because the day requires it, but because something within her gently asks her to. She walks toward the window. Outside, the world is calm. Not bright, not dim, balanced. She opens the window. Air enters. Soft. Familiar. But today, every rainy evening, every silent night, all of it still exists. Not gone, not lost, just completed. Thomas wakes shortly after. He senses the difference too, though he would not describe it in words. He looks toward Elizabeth. She does not turn immediately, but she knows he is awake. Some understanding does not require sight. Mary wakes next. She sits up slowly. Something about the morning makes her quieter than usual. Samuel wakes last, as always, but today, even his waking is softer. The house is awake, but not active. Not yet. For a moment, everything simply exists. Together. without purpose, without direction. Then, gently, life resumes. Elizabeth begins her morning tasks. Not different, but felt differently. Thomas stands and prepares to step outside. His movements steady, familiar. Mary watches, learning, always learning. Samuel follows quietly, not running, not rushing. The door opens. Light enters. Thomas steps outside. The ground is firm. The sky is open. He pauses, just once, then continues. Inside, Elizabeth continues her work. But today, each movement feels complete as it happens, not leading to something else, not waiting for the next step. Mary begins helping. Her movements more confident now, more certain. Samuel sits near the hearth again. But he does not drift away. He watches, fully present. Time moves, as it always has. Morning becomes midday. Midday becomes afternoon. Nothing dramatic happens. No sudden change. No final event. And yet, everything feels like an ending. Because nothing is unfinished. The house no longer holds expectation. It holds memory. Elizabeth pauses near the window once more. The light is softer now. Afternoon beginning to lean toward evening. She looks outside. Not searching. Not waiting. Simply seeing. Thomas returns later in the day. His work done. His posture relaxed. They do not speak much. They never have. But today, silence feels fuller. Mary sits quietly, no longer just observing, understanding. Samuel rests near the hearth, not sleepy, just calm. The day continues toward evening. The light changes slowly. Golden tones stretch across the wooden floor. Shadows grow longer, but softer. Elizabeth lights a small flame, not because darkness demands it, but because it completes the day. The house glows, warm, steady. Outside, the sky shifts toward quiet color. Not dramatic, just gentle. Inside, everything is still. Not empty, complete. Elizabeth sits. Thomas rests. Mary watches. Samuel leans gently into stillness. No one speaks, because nothing needs to be said. The day ends, not with silence, but with understanding. That life was never about the moments that changed everything. It was about the quiet moments that never needed to. The light fades, but something remains. Not seen, not heard. Felt. Always.